Hello and welcome. My name is Mike Bombard. I'm one of the pre-sales cloud architects here at CloudBolt, and we're going to be covering, I'm starting just putting together a brand new video series called How Do I Do Something in CloudBolt? The subject of today's video is going to be, it's kind of a bonus video because they overlap in function, but we're going to start off by talking about how do I manage VMware snapshots in CloudBolt, and by way of just relation, the way that we manage VMware snapshots in CloudBolt, we are using rules to manage snapshots. So we're going to use this opportunity to cover off both of those topics. Should be a good quick video, maybe 10 to 15 minutes worth of content. So hopefully this is helpful, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I am logged into my CloudBolt instance. This is my personal development instance, and what we're going to start with here is we're actually going to start with CloudBolt Rules. So the CloudBolt Rules Engine, and there's some good documentation on the Rules Engine here. Basically, rules allow CloudBolt admins to define conditional logic. It's periodically executed, may trigger custom actions based on the result. So the rules documentation, I would recommend it. The other thing I'm going to point out here before we leave this page is the check method is the entry point for our Python modules when you're leveraging a rule. So we'll take a look at that here in just a minute, but that's something that we will have to know here in just a minute. So CloudBolt, we're going to start by going to All Admin, the admin dropdown, go to All Admin. Then we're going to go over to Rules here under the orchestration header. And when we get to our rules page, we're going to scroll down just a little bit until we see this clean up old snapshots rule. And what rules are in CloudBolt, again, we kind of had a summary from the docs earlier, but the way that I think about rules inside of CloudBolt is they are if-then logic. They typically consist of a Python module that identifies resources with certain, that match certain conditions, and then it will take those resources and pass them over to a then. What do we want to do with those resources once we've identified them? What kind of action do we want to take? So this is an extremely powerful orchestration capability inside of the CloudBolt platform. We're going to, like I said, for the majority of this, we're just going to focus on that specific use case. But in doing so, it's going to help us just identify a little better how to work with rules inside of CloudBolt. So I'm going to start by taking a look at the CloudBolt plugin here that backs up our if side of the equation. So find Old VMware Snapshots. This is a plugin, like I'd mentioned. The insertion point for rules-related CloudBolt plugins is this check method. So when we first run this rule, we're going to start at this check method. We're just going to break this down a little bit here in a minute. I'm actually going to make some changes here because the way that my environment works, I don't necessarily want it to work that way. So we'll take a look at that here in just a second. But let's talk about out-of-the-box behavior. So we have a threshold number of days before expiration, and you'll see if you've gone through any of the other videos in CloudBolt, our CloudBolt plugins, because we are backed by the Django Web Framework, our CloudBolt plugins are Python modules that are all templatable. We're leveraging Django templates here to identify what we need to tell CloudBolt is an input into our script. So this is really cool. We can put double curly brackets around things inside of the script. That will create parameters here. These parameters can then have constraints set around them. They could have conditional logic and display type logic to tell when to display fields or pull data from external sources, all of those kinds of things. These are extremely powerful. But we're going to start by going through and just picking through all of this. So there are two inputs here, threshold number of days. So we want to find snapshots that are within X number of days. And we want to give the user a capability to do a dry run. Maybe we don't want to start with this out of the box, just deleting all of the snapshots inside of the environment. I would highly recommend doing this in a dry run fashion first. Make sure and take a look at those old snapshots. We have a lot in our environment, so I am going to get rid of a lot of them because they're really not applicable. But we'll kind of walk through that as we get into this. So let's go back to our check method. Just to review this real quick, the check method is where we start. First thing we're going to do, we're going to run through some logic to get all of the vSphere resource handlers. And I'm not entirely sure where we're looking for the name contains, exclude name contains unstable. So maybe there's something we do under the covers that if the connectivity isn't always stable, we relabel that in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, but we get all of those vSphere resource handlers. We're then going to create a variable called resource handlers done. We're going to loop through all of those resource handlers. We're going to call one of these other methods that then goes through and gets the snapshots for that resource handler. So we're not going to dig into all of this Python code. It's available in your CloudBolt instance. If you wanted to pick through it and figure out what we're doing here, you certainly can. But what I'm going to do, though, is I'm actually going to go back over to my rules page, and we're going to execute this rule. So clean up old snapshots. I do have it currently set to enabled, but I also have, so this rules condition, these are the defaults for this rule so that if you are running it in an automated fashion, so rules by default, they're actually run and executed by a recurring job inside of CloudBolt. So CloudBolt does a lot of automation, and one of the ways that we handle automation inside of CloudBolt is with what we call recurring jobs. That recurring job calls the rules engine. I believe it's once a day by default, but because the job scheduler, the recurring jobs engine, allows you to set the schedule for each of those recurring jobs, you can tailor that for your specific use case and determine how often you want these rules to run inside of your environment. But clean up old snapshots. My defaults here, I have 30 days set as a default, and default value for dry run is true. We don't necessarily want to delete quite yet. We'll get there as we go through the video. I'm going to go ahead and execute the rule. And you'll notice because I'm executing it manually, I have the option to select dry run and the number of days before expiration. I'm going to go ahead and just run this, and we'll see what it gives us as we go through that. Here's our job that got kicked off. And we should see in just a second here the result of all of those snapshots. So notice for one vCenter, it didn't find any snapshots. We have a second vCenter here where it found 6 matching snapshots. And then the vCenter that I really want to focus on is our demo vCenter has 17 or 11 snapshots inside of there. And you'll notice some of these are maybe, it's now May 5th. So some of these are maybe 2 months old, but others of these I ran into earlier. I noticed December 6th of 2021, that snapshot's never going to restore. We don't really need that in the environment. So versus me having to go through, find all of these servers and manually delete each of these snapshots, I do want to go through and automatically delete the ones that we really don't need. And I'm probably going to set my threshold back a little further than 30 days, maybe give it 60 days. We really just don't need to have these hanging around for that long. It's a bad practice. It slows down storage, can cause all kinds of issues. So I am going to go through the process to update this because, like I mentioned, there are 3 vCenters I'm connected to in here. One of them doesn't have any snapshots. The other one, I don't know what any of these snapshots are. They are old snapshots, but it's also not something that I'm responsible for managing. So when I mentioned earlier, I'm going to edit this rule to allow me to capture only servers that are in the vCenter that I care about. So we're going to dive into Python just a little bit. It's not going to be a ton. We're just going to add some additional logic to the out-of-the-box behavior in CloudBolt. And that's one of the really powerful features around the system is we don't set a lot of things like as a hard limit for our customers. We'll give you the out-of-the-box code for the way that we think things should work for most customers. And then if you need to tailor that for a specific use case, you absolutely can. Okay, so back into our clean up old snapshots plugin here. The next thing that I am going to do, so you notice at the top of this script here, we have a couple of, we're setting our variables at the top of the script, which is okay. So I'm going to just follow what we've already done here so far. And I'm going to say, let's do, the input that I want to set is, let's do vCenters. Actually, I'm going to call this, let's just first search the script to make sure that this doesn't exist in here already. So there's nothing, I'm going to call it resource handler IDs because that's what I'm going to capture from the end user. I'm going to give them a list of available resource handlers that they can select from, and then I'm going to allow them to select it. So resource handler IDs equals vSphere. I don't remember what that type is, so I'm going to come down here and grab it from below. So we're just going to take this exact same line. We're going to say resource handler IDs equals vSphere resource handler dot objects dot exclude. That should be okay. This is going to give me all resource. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save this. We're going to create a generate options plugin here in just a minute where we'll use that line. But for now, what I want to do is I just want to say resource handler IDs equal. Let's say. I'm going to call it resource handler IDs. We'll change the label here in a second when this creates it. But effectively, this is going to allow us to create a list of objects. So I'm going to save this right now. And notice the resource handler IDs now pops up to the top. I'm going to change the label for the end user so that as they go through this, I'm going to call this resource handlers and give it a description, which resource handlers would you like to include when cleaning up snapshots? I am going to make it a required field because in my environment, again, I think we're always going to have this be, always have it be needed because there's only a single vCenter that I ever want to touch. So I'm going to leave this as a string. We could also do integer because IDs in CloudBolt are integers, but I usually just leave that as string. One of the key things I'm going to point out here, though, is I'm going to allow multiple values. And what that's going to do is it's going to show me the list of available resource handlers, and then it's going to allow me to select one, all, none. So it'll allow me to select multiple objects. So let's go ahead and save. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another, what we call a generated options plugin in CloudBolt. So I'm going to do generate options for. So the key with a generated options plugin is the prefix to the plugin has to be called generate options for. And then we match the name of the input parameter that we're trying to generate options for. So RHIDs. We're going to do that. We can pass in quargs. I think field is also a valid option here. Could be wrong, but let's see how this works. But really what we want to do, we want to get all of the resource handlers. So here's all of our resource handlers, and it's going to be with the exclude option. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return an array. So we're going to create a list of tuples. And the reason we're doing tuples is CloudBolt allows you to return on the left-hand side of the tuple. I can put the value for the resource handler that I want, which would be the ID. I'm going to do rh.id. And then on the right-hand side of the array, I can do rh.name. So this is going to be a little more user-friendly. So the right-hand side is the label we're going to allow the user to read. And then for RH in RHs. So that should give me the ability to see my selected resource handlers. Now, the next thing that I need to do is because I set my resource handler IDs, I also, because this is kind of a global variable, I'm going to make this all caps. And those are my resource handler IDs. Then what I'm going to do is I can go through in my check method. I'm just going to comment out the bulk resource handler grabbing for now. I think I can do like an ID is in a list of objects. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to do for RH_ID in RH_IDs. So that should work. And then I'm just going to get the vSphere resource handler at the beginning here. There's multiple ways to do this in CloudBolt. This is just a way that I know offhand. But like I said, I think Django allows the filter to actually parse through a list of objects to find your result. And I'm going to do get ID equals RH_ID. And that should do the trick. So let's save the code here. So now our code saves. We're going to go back to our rules engine page. And I am going to hit my edit button because we should see the drop-down options in here. There we go. So we see our 3 resource handlers. So that's the generate options plugin doing its work. I'm going to select vCenter.cblabsales.net. We're going to hold on to that. So we now have a third input added to our condition for the rule. And we're going to save here. So that way, when this runs at 2 in the morning tonight, it's going to look at the correct vCenter when it does these things. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually execute it. I do have to reselect the resource handler, and it's going to be cblabsales.net. And again, we could do all, we could do none. So all, none, but cblabsales.net is the one that we care about. Let's make sure that we're getting those 11 results like we saw before. And as long as we are, then we should be good. Doesn't like something about that. Let's see. Okay, so there's something else in line 101 that was referencing the resource handlers, and that's okay. So let's go back over to our rule. We're going to go right down to line 101. So the handy thing with that is it tells you the exact line that the error was on. So here's our length of resource handlers. So here, all we're doing here is it's telling us how many resource handlers we're going to cycle through. So I can take that, and since we're not doing anything with the resource handler object itself, I'm just going to put my resource handler IDs in there because this is a list as well. And that list has a length to it. So we should be good here. I'm going to also, while I'm here, I'm going to make sure there aren't any other RHs that I missed. So that one's commented out. RH is done, that's fine. RH is done is fine. RH is done is fine. So that's everything. Those are all of the RHs that I think would cause an issue here. So save our method again, our function, our CloudBolt plugin, I guess would be the correct terminology. Let's go ahead and execute the rule one more time. vCenter cblabsales.net. Let's check out our job. Okay, it's red again. That's all right. So again, we're back to line 109. I thought we went a line forward. Let's see. CloudBolt snapshot scanning 1 vCenter. So we see that log event that we changed. We see the total number of vCenters it's going to check snapshots for. And then now it's line 109. So this set progress is a logging method in CloudBolt. It actually, when you use a set progress, it shows the output here on this screen here. I can also do something with like a logger, but the logger is going to write events to the detailed job log here versus set progress should be used for more high level logs that you want your end users to be able to see on the screen. So we're working on, no, RH is not defined. So maybe it didn't find our resource handler. So let's go back. So line 109 again is where we're looking at this time. Line 109, here's where it says it's working on resource handler. Oh, you know what I did? I did not set this to resource handler. I didn't capture the vSphere handler after I grabbed it, but it didn't error. So I think that we're getting the handler. We're just not, it didn't, we didn't save it and store it and pass it on to the next step. Let's try this hopefully one last time. There we go. We have green, so that's a start. And look, we're seeing 11 snapshots again. Like I said, I'm going to do one more thing before we actually execute this for the environment. I'm going to go ahead and do, let's edit the rules condition. I want to see at 60 days how many snapshots we have left in the so 60 days, reselect our resource handler. I'm still on a dry run, so it's not going to take any action, but I want to see how many snapshots it finds that are older than 60 days. And I don't really want to go through and delete a ton of snapshots right now, just because this is the first one. If it errors, I like to take things a little more incrementally. So still 10 snapshots. I'm going to take this back maybe maybe a full year, 365 days, and see how much better that is. I don't want to take action on a ton of them the first time through. So just being safe with this versus trying to boil the ocean out of the gate. All right, it looks like one snapshot. So that's perfect. And this is one I knew I needed to get rid of anyway. It's this snapshot has been out there since December of 2021. That snapshot's never going to restore inside of our environment. So I think that's a great example to use here. So my delete snapshots is enabled. I'm going to go ahead and rerun this again, but this time I'm going to change it to false for dry run. We go back to 365 days, select my cblabsales.net resource handler. I'm going to go through and run this delete action. And while that's running, I'm going to go into my vCenter. So it did not like something along those lines. Created job, finished one of one subjobs, completed checking rules. So the execute rule actions was different. So it looks like my service account actually doesn't have permission to delete those snapshots. So we're not allowed to do those things. I'm going to pause this real quick, add that permission, and just verify that things are working. So I'll be back in just a second. All right, so we're going to try this one more time. What I found out is this F5 server with that old snapshot is actually in an area of our vCenter that really shouldn't be seen by CloudBolt. So something's messed up with my vCenter permissions. Kind of curious as to why it's not blocking visibility to this F5 server, but that's okay. Temporarily, I've actually given my service accounts the virtual machine power user permission here, which has the delete snapshot permissions here. I'm actually going to jump over to our snapshot. So we see that old snapshot here. We're going to come back over to CloudBolt. We're going to give this one shot and hopefully wrap things up for the duration of this video. Let's do rules, go back to our snapshots rule. We're going to go through to execute, select cblabsales.net and extend our time period out to 365, turn off the dry run. Let's go ahead and run this and hope that things work. Okay, so it's not complaining yet. Let's go over here. So we see, there we go, remove snapshot. So the rule's doing its function so far, depending on how old the snapshot is and how much the machine has changed or the disk on the machine has changed since we started. This could take a while, but that's why we automate this and we do it during off hours, things along those lines. That way, once you get up to date with your snapshots, it's not a big deal. So we see that one of these snapshots has now been cleaned up. We see the rule is working. It's no longer available on the server. So logically, in a production environment, the next step here would be go back to my rule and change my defaults. So now that I know that this is up, it's behaving as expected, we're going to disable dry run, set it to false, reselect the appropriate resource handler, and save here. I'm not going to do that in my environment. Like I mentioned, it's a demo environment, so I don't necessarily want to do that. Sometimes I want old snapshots out there so that I can work with them and use them. So yeah, so we've covered a lot today. Again, talks through really two use cases. Number one, how do we manage snapshots inside of VMware vCenter with CloudBolt orchestration? We also went through and talked through the rules engine inside of CloudBolt. So hopefully this video was useful. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to your account team. We would be more than happy to dive a little bit deeper on any of these areas, or you have other ideas for other videos that you would like to see inside of the collection, please let us know. So thanks again for taking the time to watch, and hope you have fun automating with CloudBolt.